All right, here we go. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Freese. I'm the mayor of Tonganoxie. I'm calling to order this February 5th meeting, regular meeting of the Tonganoxie City Council. Ms. Huntington, will you call the roll, please, and note that I'm present?
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Partridge?
Here.
Ms. McCutcheon is absent. Ms. Stevens? Here. Mr. Donnelly is absent. Mr. Dale?
I'm here.
All right, would you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everyone. Item 2 on the agenda is the approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Any comments on the minutes? If not, I would.
Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're contacting Mr. Donnelly. He was available by phone this evening.
Oh, fantastic.
We've got you on speakerphone here at the chambers.
Thank you, man. All right.
Thanks, guys.
The approval of minutes. Is there a motion?
I'll move to accept as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Item 3 is the consent agenda, in which we review the bill payments from the previous period. Are there any questions about the bill payments? If there are none, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. On to new business. Oh, did we have anybody sign up to speak tonight, Mr. Porter?
No signups, Mayor.
All right, we'll move on to new business then. Item A, consider acceptance of public dedications in the final plat for Stone Creek Edition number 10. Mr. Brakovich.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I know the project developer is Roush Coleman. They have a representative here tonight should you have any questions. This is kind of the final step, our typical process for plats as they relate to development projects. Or initially we advance a preliminary plat that goes through planning and zoning, gets the approvals needed, and then we advance it to final plat. There is obviously, our city engineer and city planners have had a chance to review it. There's no additional staff comments based on what was presented to the Planning Commission last week. It is recommended for approval. You've probably seen the activity at the site in terms of the site grading that's currently underway and getting ready to likely move into some infrastructure. This, again, would be a final plat that's coming before the city council simply for the dedication of any public easements that are recorded on here. Be happy to answer any other specific questions about the plat if you have those. Just as a reminder for this project, it is for single-family homes, expecting to see 142 homes built. The project itself will be 2 phases, and again, if you have any other specific questions, be happy to answer it. I'm sure if you have anything of the developer, they'd be happy to answer that as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brakovich. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor, this is Chris. I just want to make sure that I am shown as abstained from any voting or discussion on this. While I am not involved in it, since I sold them the land, I think it's appropriate for me not to be involved in it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Anyone else? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the dedication of land for public purposes as part of the final plat for Stone Creek Edition number 10.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Ms. Huntington, because of the unusual circumstances, could you call a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Partridge?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor? Oh, wait. Sorry. Ms. Stevens?
Aye.
Mr. Dale?
Aye.
And Mr. Donnelly?
He's recusing.
Okay, you understand. Okay, all right. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for investing in Tonganoxie. We appreciate it. Moving on to item B, consider recommendation from Planning Commission for the award of the downtown study request for proposal. Mr. Brajkovic, is that yours?
I can tee it up, but Mr. Porter did a lot of work on both the RFP as well as working with our selection committee that was comprised of some planning commissioners, and Mr. Brewington, who is on our planning commission, was part of that review committee, and I'm sure if you had any questions about that part of the process, they'd be, either one of them would be happy to give you additional details. It's a item that we did anticipate in the budget. We were hoping to get that administrative process rolling by the end of the year and make a selection early in this year to be able to spend the bulk of this year on this as a project. There were 2 responses to the RFP, both firms from my limited involvement from a distance were more than qualified. And Dan, I'll ask Mr. Porter to kind of review. There was a scoring matrix developed where each participating member on the review committee had a chance to individually score those. And I think that's either been provided or we can give you the details on the cumulative scores there. But there is a recommendation moving forward tonight to go with, from the Planning Commission to the City Council. And maybe with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Porter on this one.
Thanks, George. The 2 respondents we had to the RFP were Housel Levine Associates and Multi Studio. Each applicant was completed a Zoom interview with 2 members of our Planning Commission who volunteered to serve as interviewers and evaluators, and 2 members of city staff. We evaluated those interviewees on 4 criteria: qualifications of their key personnel, experience and ability to perform the work, responsiveness to the RFP and our local conditions here in the Tonganoxie downtown community, and project cost. We asked each respondent a set of those 5 standard questions that helped us evaluate according to those criteria. Numerical scores were obtained from every evaluator, and in an interesting outcome, those scores were very consistent from person to person, even though they were completed individually. You can see a summary compilation of the scoring shown on the screen in the room here and in the agenda statement. You can see that in every category, the scores were either the same or slightly higher for multi-studio. We also showed a weighted score in comparison to just an average accumulated score that gave project cost and responsiveness and awareness of the local community priority weighting. And so for comparative sake, the non-weighted comparison was 59 for Housel Levine and 65 for Multi-Studio. The weighted score using the same inputs was 84 for Housel Levine and 95 for Multi-Studio. We had a good discussion lasting about 15 or 20 minutes at the Planning Commission where Kirsten Moreland and Howie Brewington, who participated as evaluators, gave the rest of the Planning Commission a good contextual awareness of the discussion, some of the considerations they made in developing their evaluations, and reviewed their individual notes as well, which you can see reflected a lot more detail on this next screen. At the conclusion of that discussion, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended that the City Council consider awarding the project to Multi-Studio and instructing staff to negotiate the terms of a draft contract with Multi-Studio to have the parameters of the scope of work and the exact project costs defined in more detail. We're happy to take your questions tonight, and Howie Brewington is also here. We'd like to recognize him for his efforts in the evaluation, and if you have any questions for him or if he has any comments he'd like to share, we'd of course like to allow that to occur.
Mr. Brewington, do you have anything to add?
If I remember this right, Howie Brewington, 20260 Parallel Road, Tonganoxie, Kansas. As the team said, I was a member of the group that screened and interviewed the applicants. A couple of things I'd just like to highlight for Housel Levine. They're out of Chicago, Illinois, and then Multi-Studios out of Kansas City. And one of the things that we looked at, because we know budget is a consideration, we assessed that both of them could do the work. But if we go locally, the cost will be a lot less, because that's where the big cost difference was, because you would expect that Housel Levine would have to send teammates from Chicago here to do some of the community engagement, because that was one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did as a part of this, was great community engagement, feedback from the business owners here on 4th Street and in the surrounding area. And the other thing we liked about Multi-Studio is they were very honest in that you collect the feedback, but not all feedback is equal. And given what we're asking them to do, obviously all feedback won't be equal. Everybody gets a vote, but not all no votes count, my colloquial thought there. But as we kind of went through that, very solid with Multi-Studio, and I think they'd be able to do a great job for us. And they came in with a baseline understanding of Tonganoxie that was a little better than Housel Levine had, especially as we drilled in. And like I said, we spent probably 45 minutes with each one asking them questions, and we're very comfortable with the recommendation that we're making to the city council. If y'all have any questions from someone who's not city staff, I'm here and be glad to answer.
Any questions?
Thank you for your time, for everybody who was involved with this.
Yeah,
Just-
thank you for your service.
While the font is a little bit, on a couple of them, difficult to read, it looks like it was unanimous between the 4 reviewers, right? So I think that carries a lot of weight too.
It not only was it unanimous, but the scores were almost the same. You know, very consistent across all 4 of us. We did the interviews, then we all went to our separate corners to write our notes and do our scoring. I do this in my paying job, and I've never seen 4 different people have scores as close as these were, which meant we all saw it the same way.
Great.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Howie.
Council, do you have any questions? If not, I'd accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the recommendation from the City Planning Commission to award Multi-Studio the downtown regulating plan project and request that staff negotiate the terms and the scope of service and contract agreement with Multi-Studio.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item C, consider proposal for provision of auditing services by BT and Co. PA for the year ended December 31, 2023, and for 2 subsequent years. Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Mayor. This agenda statement for this item tonight includes a lot more detail, but I'll give a brief summary to recap. For everyone's recollection, in 2019, we completed an RFP process for auditing services and entered into an agreement with Kramer and Associates to audit the fiscal years 2018, 2019, and 2020. During 2019's fiscal year audit, Mr. Kramer and his firm, Kramer and Associates, notified the city that they'd be unable to complete the audit services as previously agreed, and asked that the city consider making a contract extension of his contract with a new firm, Burbick, Trahan and Company, BT and Co., who has since completed the 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 audit processes for the city. We are at the conclusion of our last 3-year term agreement, which was entered into in 2020 with BT and Co. And so we have an opportunity now to evaluate the next steps going forward. If you remember also from the 2019 RFP process, BT and Co. was the sole alternate respondent to the city's RFP. We only collected 2 bids, one from BT and Co. and the other from Kramer and Associates. Karen Lynn, who you'll recall is the managing director of BT and Co., let us know last fall and also again recently that she is retiring at the end of 2024. She's appointed a succession plan for Kayla Williams and their firm to serve as the director when she leaves that position. We also have an indication that Alex Johnson would be a staff member involved in the city's audit for 2023 fiscal year. And that's a best practice that I'm sure Mr. Partridge would attest to, that in a larger auditing firm, different staff are assigned in successive years of working with the same firm, so you don't have too many years of consistency between staff at the city and staff at the auditing firm in particular. The proposal shown tonight is a 3-year term, including the 2023 fiscal year, 2024, and 2025. And the financial expectation of cost for the base audit process is listed in the agenda statement. 2023's fiscal year would be $15,345 in fees, moving up in the 2 successive years to $16,850 and $18,100, along with an additional fee of $3,000 to $4,000 for a single audit requirement, and with additional single audit major programs adding $2,000 to $3,000 in cost. The city hasn't completed a single audit for the last 2 fiscal years. We do anticipate that in 2024's fiscal year audit, a single audit will be required, but 2023 is not anticipated to include that cost. As we look at our budget limitations for this service, the bid for the 2023 fiscal year audit of $15,345 falls well within the planning parameters we built last summer into this year's budget. Staff do have a good working relationship and experience with this firm, and we felt that they've provided good, accurate reports to the city council, as well as opportunities for you to reach out to them at your leisure and your request. We do have in the agenda statement and the agenda packet a proposal for those 3 years, as well as a draft letter of engagement that would be executed upon the approval of the city council for the 2023 fiscal year. I'm happy to take any questions you have, and I'm sure George would be as well, but we think this is a good proposal.
Any questions?
I'm sorry if you said it, but which program are you expecting to be a major program in '24?
It'd be the ARPA funds utilization. Yeah.
All sounds good to me.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to authorize the acceptance of the auditing services proposal from Tron Company PA for the year ending December 31st, 2023, and the 2 subsequent years. I authorize the mayor and city manager to execute the letter of engagement with them for the preparation of an audit for the fiscal year ending on December 31st, 2023.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stevens. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Partridge. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item D, Public Wi-Fi Provision Project Update. Mr. Brakovich?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I'm going to give just a quick history of how we even got to the point where there was public Wi-Fi available, and then turn it over to Mr. Porter, who's been working with both Midco and some of our local agencies. So as a reminder to all of us, and maybe anybody that's watching or listening, there were 2 separate, let's call them tranches of money that were made available by the federal government during COVID. The first was under the CARES Act, and the second was the ARPA funds that were just referenced. Those were made available in slightly different ways. So the CARES Act funding, which came first, was allocated through the federal government to the state. The state pushed the funds to the county, and then the county was to distribute those to local communities. And it was a typical formula that they always use based on population and those kinds of things. So what we had to do to get access to the approximate $1 million that was going to be available to our community through CARES Act was develop a spending plan. That spending plan then had to be submitted to the county, approved by the county, and then we had to coordinate with, even though they approved the plan, any invoices or costs. Essentially, we're at the mercy of the county to approve things and give us money. So it worked out in the long run, but I just wanted to make sure that we all remember that that was the process. So in order to develop a spending plan, there were very specific criteria based on the program, and it came directly from federal funds. And so I want to just cover kind of the 3 to 4 big projects we did. The first was under an allowable expenditure category called economic growth or economic support. And so the city council approved a plan that allocated $400,000 in funds towards small business grants. I believe we gave out 23 small business grants, and happy to report that during COVID and even today, of all of those allocations we did, there's only 2 that are no longer in companies that didn't survive or didn't make it through that period. So we were very pleased to report that. The second one I want to cover was, you'll probably remember during that time, telemeeting was just blossoming, telework was kind of a new concept, and so there were funds that could be used towards improvements in telework capabilities and kind of under the guise of public health. We actually used those funds to repurpose this facility that was the former library, and that was about $120,000. So we used that for equipment and building upgrades, and that's why we're able to stream these on the city's YouTube channel now. And I think that's been a great outcome. We also allocated a minor amount of funds both towards the food pantry, where we were able to coordinate with Good Shepherd to get funding and food to those families that were most in need during that time. And then we set aside a very small amount for that was eligible for overtime for essential workers. And so we essentially went back and audited time cards for any employee that was asked to respond during COVID in a medical capacity or emergency response, and just issue them kind of a stipend pay on a per hour basis that they work those emergencies. And that was about $50,000. But what we're talking about tonight was under a category called distance learning. Again, kind of the same idea as telework, but I think just applied to education. And what we suggested at that time was an enhanced online learning opportunity. And what we thought that would manifest in our community is there was a lack of public Wi-Fi available. And I thought this was an amazing concept that the City Council agreed to explore, especially in a community as small as ours. And so we really focused on how do we boost or make Wi-Fi available and free to the public. So we targeted the library parking lot because the library was under reduced admissions based on the whatever that head count was at that time. You think I would have burned all this into my memory bank somewhere. But the library reported, hey, we have people in our cars waiting, and so we wanted to boost that area. Chieftain Park, through the Recreation Commission and discussion with them, outdoor activity was not only encouraged and promoted, but we saw a significant increase in the use of that. So we targeted that area, and then the pool, the water park area, was really our third area. And so we entered into a contract with Midco for $165,000 in kind of late summer, early fall of 2020 to go out and create these access points. So they brought in equipment, and then the balance of that contract was there's a monthly fee associated with providing this Wi-Fi. And so essentially we've come up to this point where what we paid for in advance has burned out. And so, Dan, as I asked Mr. Porter to kind of take that next step, we did reach out to both the public library and the Recreation Commission and said, hey, you know, the city allocated these funds. Is this something you still see as viable or important to your organization? Because it would be a time to transition monthly cost over. And so that was the first aspect. The second one that Mr. Porter has done a great job on is coordinating with Midco to say, hey, when we first did this, we weren't really sure what we were looking for. So essentially, Midco brought a huge system here. I mean, these are the system that was brought here was what they bring into huge festivals and expect large crowds. And so we've been monitoring the usage of that. We're kind of at the mercy of Midco because the data has to come from them. But I think what you'll hear from Mr. Porter tonight is maybe moving into the future, we don't quite need that level of service availability. So with that, unless you have any questions for me, I'll ask Mr. Porter to take over. But thank you for the chance to recap our amazing CARES Act spending plan.
Thanks, George. So to give a quick example, again, of the difficulty in acquiring this data about utilization, Midco uses a company you may have heard of called SolarWinds, which is a large data analytical engine type product and company service that they are able to glean data usage by access point, so they can see how much is uploaded, downloaded, and how many users connect. They don't collect personal information. They don't collect information about what activities are going on. It's sort of an arm's length level of looking at this system. They're also able to collect data going back about 30 to 45 days from a point in time, but they're not able to go back longer into the past. That presented a big problem because this fall, when we started this analysis with them, they were already too late to be able to see summer utilization. So while the Chieftain Park and the library have season-long, year-long activity and utilization, the water park has a very brief summer period where we have a lot of use and then very limited to no use the rest of the year for the most part. What we did ask Midco to do is to do a better job of periodically giving us some visualizations and statistics. We do have a meeting later this week, like George mentioned, involving the library staff with Brad Eccles with the Recreation Commission, myself, and with our Midco sales rep to help have a better picture of what that utilization has looked like, at least in the last 30 days. They've shared some snippets and Zoom calls with us, and frankly, it's kind of interesting. We are seeing a little bit of utilization at the water park, even in the first week of January. You'll remember the weather was pretty terrible, but we also do know that it extends to the boundary of the property, so you have people walking by on the sidewalk, biking, playing in Gallagher Park. If they're in that area, it's covered as well. So there is some ability to utilize it in all seasons in all three of these locations. Some considerations we're going to talk about, though, at that meeting later this week include the library as a host of the three sites. So if you think about it like a pipeline, the first spot in the pipeline is the library site. Everything kind of flows through there to the water park and to Chieftain Park. So we're going to be evaluating with Midco's assistance what options there are to pick and choose from those three sites, which should continue. We also, in looking at the data they've sent us so far, are very confident that 10 gig service, which is what's currently available, is much in excess of what's needed for the level of use we're seeing. That would be, like George mentioned, something for like concerts and festivals and really special events where you have tons of concentrated usage. In this case, what we're seeing instead is some spikes in usage, but generally at one time, no more than 20 or 25 users on the network. So 1 gig service would be more than sufficient in Midco's opinion, and that's obviously at a much reduced cost on a monthly basis than what we could expect for 10 gig service like we've got today. So looking at scenarios of sites, looking at the flex of how much service provision are two important points. Cost sharing with the entities that own and operate these properties. The city only operates the water park. We own the library, but the library has operational controls on their site. And then, of course, Chieftain Park is operated and owned by the Rec Commission. When we look at the library as well, the access points blend the indoor and outdoor space. So there may be opportunities for the library to examine their E-rate internet access program, which pays for their internal internet service that's hardwired in the building. And so it may be that a scenario where we keep Chieftain Park and the water park, but remove the library from the outdoor Wi-Fi program would make sense and still serve the needs of the library's patrons. That's something to consider. The cost will play a part in that. We don't have final cost quotes from Midco, but we are reminding them periodically that this was a sole source agreement, like George mentioned, with them at a time when we were in a rush to do the program and use a community partner like them. We also allow them to use Midco in the name of the network, so people who are asked to join on their phones or devices see Midco and the branding of Midco. So it's a collaboration between the city and the community and Midco, not simply a service that we pay them for and then change to our own needs necessarily. We do hope that we'll be able to bring back to you those cost estimates and visualizations, but really the point of our report tonight was to give you that context about what's going on and also to get your thoughts on questions we're not considering or things we haven't considered that you think are important for you to make a decision on allocating funds and entering into a long-term agreement with Midco. I'm happy to take any questions you have. I think the last thing I'll add is that Midco would like to look at a multi-year plan agreement to go into in this service. I think a couple cautions we have are not knowing the summer data about utilization is a big point of contention for us, especially for the water park. And so probably a crutch to get us a few months down the road before we see better numbers is probably an appropriate ask on our part in terms of term of agreement to consider. But happy to take any questions you have or open to your thoughts on things that need to be delved into a little deeper.
Council, do you have any questions?
Thank you for the update and for considering this. I live right next to the library, and I do know that people are there utilizing the exterior. If it could be maintained in the exterior Wi-Fi and hours at the library may be closed, like later on Sunday or later in the evenings. It seems like what they are offering now is way more than we need. So if there's at least some access point from the public library, it sounds like we'll have it at maybe possibly at Chieftain Park. But I appreciate the collaboration amongst the entities and that you're taking the lead on that. So thank you.
Thanks.
I guess another question I had would be, is there another spot that would be better served, like downtown or the park out on the west side, or, no, sorry, not west, north?
Well, the infrastructure is already embedded in those places, yeah.
right.
So, I mean, just utilizing what's already there, but maybe less of it to keep cost in mind. So,
Right,
anyway, but thank you.
all right, good report, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Moving on to the city manager agenda, Mr. Prikovich.
No additional items, Mayor, thank you.
City attorney agenda, we have an executive session. Ms. Stevens, would you take care of that, please?
I move that the city council recesses into executive session to obtain legal advice regarding communications received from the county about a recent annexation pursuant to attorney-client consultation exception in KSA 754319B2. The executive session will include the city attorney, city manager, assistant city manager. The open meeting will resume in the city council chamber in 15 minutes. So at 7:47 p.m.
I'll second.
Second, thank you. Is there, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're in executive session. Are we ready? There we go. We're back in regular session. Let the record show that no binding action was taken in the executive session. Moving on to the Mayor Pro Tem agenda. Ms. Stevens, do you have anything?
No items this evening.
City Council agenda, anyone have anything to mention?
Yes, I would like to make a motion.
You would.
I would. I'd like to make a motion regarding resolution number 042?
02.
02-24-01, a third resolution requesting the Board of County Commissioners of Leavenworth County, Kansas, to make a finding that annexation of certain real property not adjoining the primary boundary of the city of Tonganoxie, Kansas, will not hinder or prevent the proper growth and development of the area or of any other incorporated city located within Leavenworth County, Kansas, pursuant to KSA 12-520C.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Was there a second?
I'll second.
Just a real quick point of order. Do we need to add that to the agenda before we vote on it, or can you just ad hoc?
You can add at the last minute. You're not required to have an agenda.
Okay.
But yeah, when items arise, it's okay to do this.
Okay. Any discussion before we vote? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Mayor agenda, I visited with the fifth grade class today to give them some pizza for their food drive efforts. So that was fun today. And I also have an executive session for discussion of non-elected personnel. Ms. Stevens?
I move that the city council recess into executive session to discuss the city manager's annual review process pursuant to the personnel matters of non-elected personnel, exception KSA 75-4319B1. The open meeting will resume in the city council chambers in 10 minutes at 8:01 PM. The executive session will include the city attorney and assistant city manager.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're in executive session. don't know that I have anything more. Let the record show that no binding
Mayor.
action was taken in the executive session.
Mayor, I apologize, but we do need to wait until 8:01.
Okay, my mistake.
That's okay. I know it seems trivial, but it's just, it's one of those rules.
It's the rules. Okay, it's 8:01. Let the record show that no binding action was taken in the executive session. I have nothing more. Did you have something to add, Mr. Partridge?
Yes, I did. Real quickly, on behalf of the Tonganoxie Historical Society, I wanted to remind everybody that their chili cook-off will take place on Thursday, next Thursday, February 15th. So if you can find time to go, they would appreciate it.
Very cool. Thank you.
Come on. It's going to be somewhere in the great city of Tonganoxie. I don't know where.
All right. Jake, did you have anything?
Yes, I had on my agenda a motion to adjourn.
Is